This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Mohamed Morsi buried in Cairo a day after collapsing in court. More than 100 people killed in an apparent inter-ethnic revenge attack in DR Congo. And a China-Tunisia bilateral cooperation to be boosted through higher education. Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. We'll bring you the details on those stories in just a moment, but first, Uche Okoronko with the day's business headlines. Uche.
Thank you, Beatrice. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Facebook wins government support for a cryptocurrency next year. And Vodacom DRC risks losing its 2G license in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, back to you, Beatrice.
Uche, thank you. And let's begin in Egypt. Former President Mohamed Morsi has been buried in a small family ceremony in Cairo, a day after he collapsed and died in court following a fatal heart attack. Mohamed Morsi was the first democratically elected head of state in Egypt's modern history. He was a Muslim Brotherhood leader who took office in 2012 and was ousted a year later by the military and later imprisoned. Mohamed Morsi has been sentenced to more than 40 years in prison in separate trials. He was accused of leading an outlawed group, spying for foreign country and terrorism. Well, let's get an update now on the death of Mohamed Morsi. I'm joined by Adel Mahroui. He's in Cairo for us. Adel, the Muslim Brotherhood has described Morsi's death as a full-fledged murder. What is the true story?
Well, basically, the Muslim Brotherhood are trying to say that the health conditions for former President Morsi was intentionally deteriorating by the prison facility, which has been accusations totally denied by the Egyptian government. Right after he passed away on yesterday, the Egyptian authorities have released a statement of the exact health conditions that Morsi was suffering from. And they said that since 2017, he has been diagnosed with hyperglycemia, high blood sugar, and hypertension, high blood pressure, and he has also had malignant tumors in his brain. So in general, the former president didn't have a very strong health condition. And according to the statement, he was following up medically from the prison authorities. He even went to the military hospital, the same military hospital former President Hosni Mubarak was treated in. It's the nearest high advanced hospital next to the Tora prison where Morsi was stationed. But the Brotherhood is trying to get a lot of support. They're trying to put blame on the Egyptian government. This has been the case since 2013, since the Egyptian military responded to millions of protesters in the streets and ousted Morsi, putting him out of office. And since then, he has been in prison facing numerous trials. As you've mentioned some of them. He has also been sentenced before to death penalty, but that has been waived, and he was in a retrial in the same trial on accusations of fleeing prison and destroying public property.
Adel, so what is the next step, though, for the Muslim Brotherhood? What are they likely to do next?
Well, the Muslim Brotherhood seems to be gaining some strength. They used to enjoy some support from regional powers in the Middle East, especially from Qatar and primarily from Turkey. Yesterday, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has mourned former President Morsi, and today as well he has held sort of a funeral, a resemblance funeral in Turkey for the president, as he was not allowed to have a mass or a big event for his funeral here in Egypt. There has been a lot of movements and a lot of speculations of what and how the Muslim Brotherhood will respond. Let's see more details in the following report.
Well, Adel, We will come back to you on that package. But before we get to that story, though, Adele, could you just briefly let us know, how has the Muslim Brotherhood members reacted to the death of Mohamed Morsi, though?
As you've said earlier, the main notion among the Muslim Brotherhood leaders is that they're trying to put the concept that Morsi was murdered. Even President Erdogan has referred to the same notion, that it is not a natural sort of death. It is, of course, based on health conditions according to the Egyptian autopsy, but this is the sort that they're trying to push forward. Analysts believe that the Muslim Brotherhood may resort to violence. They believe that the Muslim Brotherhood could trigger, especially, and this was quite clear from some of the terrorist organizations that have been affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood. Organizations like Hasm and Liwa al-Sawra both have been holding several terrorist attacks in Cairo. They have attempted some assassinations and successfully killed several police and military officers. They have released statements of condolences to the former president and vowing to take vengeance from those who are responsible for his death. That's, of course, from their own perspective. And it's a strong indication, analysts say, that there might be some attempts to have further terrorist attacks in Egypt, especially that the country is hosting tens of thousands of African fans as the African Cup of Nations is scheduled to start on Friday.
Rallying pressure on Cairo to restore Morsi's presidency has been the Muslim Brotherhood's policy since 2013. This week, fate has slipped that last card away of their hands. Through these years, the group has been powerless and divided. Experts fear Morsi's death may revive the group.
Mohamed Morsi's death gave the keys of life to the Muslim Brotherhood group and the ideology. I think that countries that used to support the group may support it even further with finances, which benefits from the existence of these groups in the Middle East. His death could bridge the gaps of division among the Brotherhood's members as they unite for a cause.
Although autopsy confirmed that heart failure was the cause of death, the Brotherhood has been telling its supporters that Morsi was killed.
The expected reactions will come from the Brotherhood's armed groups that we know. They could increase plots for terrorist organizations. I expect that will be soon. A more dangerous possibility is if those members who've been politically marginalized decide to resort to violence to seek vengeance from Morsi's death. They are large in numbers, and I fear this possible shift to violence.
The banned group's management remains under its supreme leader while he serves time in prison. Morsi's ranking was quite far from the group's top management, which should leave it unaffected.
The first day following Morsi's death has passed without any significant gatherings or violence. The Muslim Brotherhood have been incapable of amassing supporters for years. And as to many, it appears that violence is their only remaining chance. Security officials are on their highest alert. They don't want to take any chances with the Brotherhood. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo. The concept about violence have been more or less confirmed, at least in the statements of these armed wings for the Muslim Brotherhood. The statements I've mentioned earlier, that they will take vengeance, and they say they will take vengeance before Morsi's blood gets cold, which an indication for some sort of a speedy measures that could be taken. In response, the entire nation is on the highest security alert. That has been the case even before Morsi's death. Because of the African Cup of Nations, the entire country has been quite prepared, at least to maintain a secure and a healthy environment for the games to move on properly. And the timing is quite tense for the Egyptian government, but it insists and has taken all measures and will stand against any attempt to disrupt the games by all means.
Adel Mahroui for us there in Cairo with that update. Thank you. Meanwhile, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi visited Belarus and met President Alexander Lukashenko to strengthen their bilateral relations. Later, President el-Sisi planned an official visit to Romania, where he was scheduled to conclude his European tour. El-Sisi did not comment on camera on the death of former Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi, who died on Monday after collapsing in a Cairo court while on trial on espionage charges. The 67-year-old had been in jail since being toppled after barely a year in power. following mass protests against his rule. Morsi was buried in a small family ceremony in Cairo early on Tuesday. Other former allies of Morsi expressed their condolences in social media posts, some condemning the conditions in which Morsi had been held.
I hope that today's visit to the Republic of Belarus gives a momentum to strengthening and development of relations on all issues that we will discuss.
This is a historic visit because this is the first visit of a president of a huge African country, a large country than our Belarus.
At least 161 people have been killed in the northeastern province of the Democratic Republic of Congo in the past week. Survivors who fled to safety say people were killed and homes set on fire. The violence is an apparent resurgence of ethnic clashes between farming and herding communities.
Survivors of the attack recall how they have lost members of their families.
I didn't come here voluntarily, but because last week on Monday around midday we saw a group of people from the hills massacre us and burn our villages. And since we had no weapons, we couldn't do anything but look at our villages burning and our people die. In fact, I myself lost a lot of members of my family and of my wife's family. One of my sister-in-law was killed with her 5 children.
The series of attacks in Ituri province have mostly targeted Hema herders, who have long been in conflict with Lendu farmers over grazing rights and political representation, although the exact identity of the assailants remains murky.
The Lendu came during the day on Monday. It was 12 o'clock. We were in the fields when we heard about it. We had started to run towards our homes, which we found had been set alight. Some people were burnt alive inside the houses. We could not take anything with us. They killed people with machetes, and we don't even know what they did with the bodies. We don't know if they even buried them. That's why we fled here.
The village attacks between the Hema herders and Lendu farmers eased, with tenuous calm taking over until this month.
Malili 1,
Malili 1, Malili 2, Malili 3, Waga 1 and Waga 2 were all burnt down, and these hooligans are still there now. The bodies are lying on the ground and they haven't even thought of burying them.
The number of 161 bodies is a number that came out of just one single common grave in Tuche. As I told you, the attacks were launched on several Hema villages, and this is aimed at destroying the social or ethnic fabric of the community.
Open conflict between Hema and Lendu from 1999 to 2007 resulted in an estimated 50,000 deaths in one of the bloodiest chapters of a civil war in eastern Congo that left millions dead from conflict, hunger, and disease. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
And staying on that story, in the DRC and the apparent resurgence in ethnic clashes between farming and herding communities, the UNHCR now fears that a massive displacement of people could be a risk factor in further spreading the deadly virus Ebola.
Since the beginning of June, more than 300,000 people have fled inter-ethnic conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Fresh violence has erupted once again in the country's Ituri province.
The situation in Ituri province has worsened since the middle of the last week, with multiple attacks involving the Hema and Lendu groups.
The northeastern province accounts for about 10% of Ebola cases in the current outbreak. It also sits on the DRC's eastern border with Uganda.
As the displacement continues at this massive scale, fears are more people will try to seek safety in Uganda.
The continuing conflict is complicating the tracing and treatment of patients at risk from Ebola. The deadly hemorrhagic virus has recently spread to Uganda, with 2 confirmed deaths. Ugandan authorities are scaling up emergency response at the border. Disease surveillance is conducted not only at entry points, but also in the communities and at health facilities. Uganda has vaccinated many of its frontline health workers. It has also approved the use of 3 experimental treatments.
The mobility of the population in North Kivu and Ituri is a risk factor. So every time you have people moving in high numbers, it's more complicated to do the work on follow-ups, contact tracing, follow-up on people who are supposed basically to be observed for on a daily basis for 21 days.
Although the WHO has not declared the current Ebola outbreak an international emergency, countries neighbouring the DRC are set to remain on high alert. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
As Somalia prepares for the 2021 person, one-vote elections, members of the country's electoral body have started crossing Africa to gain experiences and lessons in how to manage elections. The Commission will begin benchmarking with Uganda. The 2020 polls will be the first popular elections in Somalia in more than 50 years. CGTN's Michael Baleke reports from Kampala.
Somalia's National Independent Electoral Commission making its first stop in Uganda. The plan is to share best practices for running elections.
Since Uganda has had some relative experience in conducting elections, on the issue of security, how do we manage disputes in an electoral environment? What is the role of security? To what degree is security involved in an electoral process?
Since 1991, Somalia has faced civil war and insurgency by Al-Shabaab militants. However, African Union peacekeeping forces have helped establish some stability to allow the possibility of elections.
We have our challenges, but we are overcoming, and what we are planning is, with the support of our security authority and AMISOM, to hold an election wherever it's peaceful and wherever we can.
The Department of Political Affairs of the African Union and the African Union Mission in Somalia are supporting and facilitating the process.
It's very difficult in a country in a post-conflict situation to strengthen its governance process. It's very difficult because we have different non-actors and different type of dynamics and trends who cannot be fully guided if there is no such training.
Uganda is the biggest contributor of the African Union peacekeeping mission in Somalia. It has also been involved in the training of Somalia's armed forces to take over the security of their country. In their next 4 days in Kampala, the Somali National Independent Electoral Commission will learn from their Ugandan counterparts about election preparations, security threats and their impacts on the electoral process, and the role of peace support operations during the elections. The team will also be taken through elections-related disputes and how they can be resolved. Michael Baleke, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. China-Tunisia bilateral cooperation to be boosted through higher education. And Kenyan court to sentence 4 linked to the 2015 university students' massacre.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Tunisia and China aim to boost their cooperation in higher education and scientific research. An important delegation arrived from Beijing to Tunis. It was welcomed by the parliament speaker and ministers. CGTN's Adnan Chauchi explains.
Tunisian Parliament Speaker Mohamed received in Badr city a Chinese parliamentary delegation led by chairman of the Science and Education Committee and China's ambassador to Tunisia.
Tunisia and China aim to boost their ties in education, research, cultural cooperation, as well as the economy. China is a world leader in all domains. The success of any project is guaranteed when China is our partner.
The delegation also held a meeting with the Commission of Education and Culture. It focused on the evaluation of bilateral cooperation in the scientific and academic field.
The Chinese delegation met with the Commission of Education and Culture at Parliament. It is the first time for several years that a delegation from the China Assembly visits Tunisia. This is a good beginning that will contribute to reinforcing mutual knowledge between the peoples of the two countries.
Both parties have agreed to reinforce the role of the Confucius Center, inaugurated in April 2019 at the University of Carthage, as a lever for developing scientific, cultural and academic exchanges.
The Tunisia-China ties are exceptional. The strong bond of the Belt and Road Initiative unites us. China shares with our country and region a great cultural heritage which paves way for economic cooperation and trade. Culture and education are at the heart of the Tunisia-China friendship.
The agenda also included an increase in the number of Chinese scholarships for Tunisian students and the organization of a second edition of the Chinese University Fair in early September 2019. In addition, China will install a supercalculator at the Khwarizmi Computer Center in Tunis to boost scientific research in areas requiring high computing power.
During his last visit to Beijing on the occasion of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, Tunisian Premier Youssef Chahed urged all ministries, state institutions and agencies to facilitate cooperation with China in all sectors, including higher education and scientific research, within the framework of the Belt and Road Initiative. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
In Kenya, 4 suspects linked to the Garissa University College attack that occurred on the 2nd of April 2015 will be sentenced tomorrow after their judgment was postponed today. The 4 suspects are accused of aiding Islamist militant group Al-Shabaab in their attack at the institution, which left about 150 students dead. The siege ended nearly 15 hours after gunmen shot their way in the pre-dawn attack at the campus, sparing Muslim students and taking many Christians hostage. Well, East Africa is said to be the most vulnerable to terror attacks of all regions in sub-Saharan Africa. CGTN's Daniel Arap Moy has been speaking to a security analyst looking at the successes and challenges in the fight against terrorism in the region.
Joining me is Mr. Mwenda Mbijiwe, a security consultant and chief executive officer of ION Security, also a former Kenya Air Force officer. Well, welcome, Mr. Mwenda.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much for having me.
Terrorists have been targeting East African civilians and troops for many years now. Why have no lessons been learned?
Lessons have been learned, just that maybe we've not paid attention to the lessons. Because lessons are their mode of attack, their timing of attack, the nature of those attacks.
What are some of the current preemptive measures being employed by East African governments to counter terrorism?
The region intelligence community has since removed the barriers that they had with each other. The fear that Uganda had sharing intelligence information with Kenyan intelligence community, the same with Tanzanian and the region, the boundary for intelligence sharing has almost been eradicated.
Why do we often fail to preempt these attacks despite sometimes credible intelligence reports pointing to imminent attacks by terrorist groups?
That was true up to about a year ago or 2 years ago. But since then, there has been almost what I would call automatic response to intelligence, actionable intelligence. I agree with you. Westgate, it was a complete failure of fusing together intelligence and police and military operation to preempt the attack. The same happened a year later less than a year later in Garissa University attack. However, since then, especially after the Garissa, there was a cracking of the whip. In Kenya, the president made his intelligence chiefs, or rather his security chiefs, he held them to account.
Would you agree to the fact that East Africa region is especially vulnerable to terrorism because of conflict, weak governance, collapsed state institutions, and porous borders that allows extensive and uncontrolled movement of people and illegal weapons?
That is one of the most amazing statement I've had in a long time, because a lot of people actually refuse to look at the core issues that make the region very vulnerable to terror attacks. However, now what we could add to that is we call it expansion of the terrorist map. The terror map, the boundaries are extending.
Is the use of military intervention a productive measure in countering terrorism?
When you hear military has been asked to deal with a situation, then it's a serious situation, and almost always the military does not get it wrong.
What are the successes and challenges in the fight against terrorism in East Africa?
The key challenge is maintaining law and order without hurting the societal coexistence. And that has been a key challenge, and sometimes, unfortunately, we don't even get to know how to do it. But yet, we cannot profile religion, we cannot profile people, we can only profile behavior. One of the key successes the region has had in this fight against terrorism is being able to pick lessons from most of these attacks.
Well, now let's move to West Africa. And the Nigerian government has welcomed a report by the European Union Observation Mission on the country's general election, which was held earlier this year, promising to analyze and act on the recommendations of the report. Here's EGTN's Deji Badmos with the story.
Nigeria's 2019 general elections remain one of the country's most controversial, and the EU Observation Mission's report has only further fueled that controversy. Reactions to the report has been understandably largely partisan. While Nigeria's main opposition party says the report is a vindication of its position that the elections, especially the presidential one, was rigged against it, the Nigerian government insists the report is a further confirmation and endorsement of the outcome of the presidential election, adding that the report did not in any way question the results of the election. One body that received some knocks in the EUOM report is election regulator INEC. Most of the recommendations made in the report also bothers on INEC's operations and procedure. The Commission is yet to issue a formal response, and its chairman, while receiving 2 reports on the elections from 2 international election observers, the U.S. International Republican Institute and the National Democratic Institute, stayed away from making a direct categorical statement on the EU report.
Given the size and peculiarities of different parts of the country, it is understandable that no observer group covered every polling unit and collation center throughout the Federation. For the 2019 general elections, the Commission accredited 159 domestic and foreign observer missions, made up of 39 foreign and 120 domestic, which together deployed 73,258 observers. Some of your observations some of the organizations have already submitted their reports. The Commission hereby appeals to all organizations that have not done so to submit their reports in earnest, in line with their terms of accreditation, to enable us to take a global view of all the recommendations.
Expectedly, different political groups and individuals have also been reacting to the EU report.
The joy about it is the fact that it was INEC themselves that invited this body to witness the election, to supervise the election, to make their findings about the elections, and above it all, make their reports. The reports have been made. The report have indicted INEC. The report has indicted several agencies that forms the components of governance. It therefore means ordinarily, in a system that works, the INEC chairman should have by this time resigned.
The International Republican Institute and the National Democratic Institute are due to release their reports to the public shortly. Everyone is waiting to see what they would say about the elections, and you can expect more reactions to follow after the reports. But what is of particular interest here is to see whether these reports would have any bearing on the over 700 legal cases on the elections that are currently going on in various courts across the country. CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Let's now go to Uche Okoronkwo for a look at the day's business news. Uche.
Thank you, Beatrice. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Facebook wins government support for a cryptocurrency next year. And Vodacom DRC risks losing its 2G license in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads, where opportunity meets innovation, where profitable new markets collide with global trends. From the sound of an African bell on a stock market's floor, to the shout of the trader in a bustling free market. It's colorful, vibrant, and exotic. CGTN stands at the gateway to Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. From Morocco to South Africa, we talk to the deal makers and actors who fuel its engines of growth. Only on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Now, Facebook has launched a bid to bring cryptocurrency payments into the mainstream this Tuesday. The social media giant reported to have endorsement of governments and financial giants. Now, the company is expected to outline details of a virtual currency launching next year that it hopes will avoid the roller coaster volatility of blockchain technologies such as Bitcoin. The company is setting up a consortium called Libra. According to the Wall Street Journal, Libra has been joined by more than a dozen companies, including Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, and Uber. Now, the companies, along with venture capitalists and telecoms firms, will reportedly invest around $10 million each into the consortium. The consortium will also be managed externally and seek to build trust amongst consumers by pegging the virtual coin to a basket of currencies, including the dollar and the euro. Let's head to Ethiopia now. The country will split its state telecoms provider, Ethio Telecom, into two businesses before privatization. This, of course, is according to state-affiliated media. The move is a key part of the government's economic reform plan. Ethiopia could require as much as $2.2 billion to modernize the creaking, overburdened sector. Privatization is one of the key reforms promised by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. He wants to encourage competition and foreign investment after decades of state-driven economic growth. The Eastern African Nations Parliament recently passed a bill outlining the scope of a regulator for the telecom sector. Now, this is a key milestone towards attracting outside investment in the nation of 100 million people. And telecoms giant Vodacom risks losing the right to provide 2G services in the Democratic Republic of Congo. This follows a court ruling that upheld the government's suspension of its 2G license. Now, authorities from the telecoms ministry say the judgment cannot be appealed yet. The South African firm has been given 3 months to renegotiate its 2G license in the country. Here's Chris Ochambringa with more from Kinshasa.
The court ruled that Vodacom Congo's 2G telecom license be suspended over a dispute about the cost of the renewal. The DRC Telecommunications Ministry suspended Vodacom's license in April this year, saying its renewal did not follow proper procedures, an accusation that Vodacom has denied. The Minister of Telecommunications says the fee cost $65 million, but Vodacom only paid $16 million in 2015 for additional frequencies, not for the renewal. Vodacom, however, maintains that it followed all the laws and regulations at that time. The firm has been given 3 months to renegotiate its 2G license with the government before it's auctioned. The company says it's engaged in discussions with the Congolese government to reach an amicable solution. The decision threatens to disconnect 11.8 million Vodacom customers who haven't switched to 3G and 4G in remote parts of the DRC. Chris Ochambringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
And moving on now, Chinese construction firms are playing an important role in Botswana's infrastructural development. They're also carving out a prominent place in a sector once dominated by South Africa and European firms. Here's CGTN's Daniel Arab Moy explaining.
Despite the many challenges, a number of Chinese construction firms like Zhengtai Group have managed to gain a foothold in Botswana's infrastructural sector. One of the major projects undertaken by the Chinese Zhengtai Group is the 450-bed Ketumile Masire University Hospital, expected to provide excellence in medical education, research and patient-centered clinical care.
We have constructed the Ketumile Masire University Hospital with 450 beds, and this is one of the largest projects we have done in Botswana in terms of housing construction. And for this project, we won a prestigious prize back home for a job well done.
Another landmark project undertaken by the Zhengtai Group is the 110-bed Sideliga Private Hospital in the capital Gaborone, which will provide a 24-hour laboratory and pathology services, as well as a 24-hour operational pharmacy. Medical experts say that the Chinese constructed hospitals will serve the southern African countries and will probably, in the near future, be one of the first steps towards stopping medical tourism in Africa.
We want to build a different kind of culture in terms of health and in terms of wellness in this country and eventually in the region in terms of Southern Africa and also Africa. And we are aiming to see the world coming to Botswana because of this excellent hospital.
The Zhengtai Group is also constructing the Botswana Innovation Hub, designed to house startups, global corporations and research and health organizations under one massive green roof. The Chinese firms are not only actively involved in the building industry in Botswana, they are engaged in the road sector as well. Many of the Chinese firms involved in infrastructure construction in Botswana have carved out a prominent place in a sector once dominated by South African and European firms. Their method seems to have contributed to the long-standing development aims of the Botswana state. Most Chinese construction companies operating in Botswana work on public tenders independently, awarded by the Botswana government through the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Board. Daniel Arab Moy, CGTN, Gaborone, Botswana.
Now, South Africa's wildlife farming industry has grown exponentially over the past 20 years. There were about 3,500 farms in 1992, and these have grown to over 10,000 game farms this year. The biodiversity and infrastructure has offered the country a unique competitive advantage in an industry that is currently contributing over $1.5 billion to the country's GDP per year. While CGTN's Laura Walubengo gives us the details.
Thousands of tourists visit South Africa every year to experience the thrill of wildlife hunting. The industry has mushroomed over the years due to the various types of prey it offers.
Hunting in South Africa has many more variety of animals, much different than what we have in the United States. So it's a much different style of hunting in the United States. Well, where we're from, we have more mountainous, more mountain animals, more mountainous country, longer shots, but everything's much slower. African hunting is maybe a little bit shorter, but much faster.
It consists of 4 key pillars: live sale auctions of game, ecotourism, hunting and animal products. Trophy hunting generates an estimated $693.8 million a year. In 1991, a law was passed allowing private ownership of game animals. This allowed transitioning from cattle ranching to game farming.
Well, it's the only industry that South Africa has a unique comparative advantages in terms of the nature of the species that we farm with, as well as the natural biodiversity of South Africa being the 3rd most biodiverse country in the world.
There's still a huge premium paid for your top-end genetics. You know, we saw Horizon, the Buffalo Bull, sold earlier this year for a 3/4 share for 90 million. We've seen sable cows selling for well over 200 and 300,000 this year already, and buffalo cows early on this year at a signature wildlife auction for the 4 million mark. So there's still a lot of money out there to be paid for your superior genetics, and I expect that trend to continue through this year.
Game meat is also a reliable source of income for the country. Much of the meat is turned into biltong, the fabled South African dried meat snack. It contributes $579.3 million annually, despite many hunters not opting for trophies.
I think people want to eat healthier, but they don't know how to prepare. So biltong for them, venison biltong, is a healthy source for them.
Biltong is healthy. It's got a really nice flavor, and it's an easy to eat snack. So you can just eat it any time. You can substitute it for a meal. It's really just a good South African snack. It's like our own.
Game farmers are now pushing for legislation that will allow them to slaughter game on their farms, a move that is predicted will increase production for both domestic and international markets. Laura Walubengo, CGTN.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz. But coming up on Global Business Africa, Egyptian cement producer Tura Cement has stopped production due to a financial crisis caused by oversupply in its domestic market. We'll be digging in for details on that story. All that coming up top of the hour. For now, back to you, Beatrice.
Uche, thank you. And we still have more news for you here on the program. Here's what's ahead. South Africa's jazz pianist and singer awarded for great talent and philanthropy.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
A blind South African jazz pianist and singer is showing there are no limits to the human mind. Yonela Mnana's music is familiar with South African audiences. He also has a master's degree in music and has now been awarded a scholarship to complete his doctorate through Arts Research Africa, a project funded by the New York-based Andrew Mellon Foundation. CGTN's Julie Shire caught up with Mnana in Sophiatown, which was once the heart of the country's jazz scene.
South African jazz musician and composer Yonela Mnana is striking the right chords. The talented musician was born blind, but it's never limited him. Mnana has a bachelor's and master's degree from Wits University, and he also earned a doctoral scholarship from Arts Research Africa.
My master's was generally on acknowledging South African pianists as a movement, because I was studying a phenomenon. This time I want to study the aesthetics of it, the actual music, and to understand what it means to actually be a solo South African pianist. What kind of roles are we, assuming as we receive and react to the music?
South Africa has produced a rich ensemble of jazz artists, Hugh Masekela and Miriam Makeba among the musical greats who use their voices to fight against the dark days of apartheid, inspiring artists such as Mnana over the decades.
South African music is amazing, man. People have been original. And I suppose sometimes being secluded as well kind of like worked out for us, in the sense that they used the music to express what was happening in the country. And jazz itself, like I'm saying, as an agent of freedom, has been able to catapult South Africa, at least musically.
Yonela is hoping his PhD will bring greater insight into the art form.
Jazz means lots of different things. It's a feeling. It's a level of freedom as well, but it's a level also of awareness. And I like it because it gives me a sense of urgency and of agency that I can actually react and act upon, in terms of on different expressions.
Manana's talent spreads beyond concert halls and adoring audiences. He teaches music to physically disabled children in Katlehong Township in Johannesburg. He also works with choirs and community projects and is writing his name into musical history. Julie Shara, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Kehinde Wiley has recently opened the doors to a new artist residency program in Dakar, Senegal. He will also be looking to set up a studio in Nigeria, his father's homeland. The American portrait artist is best known for his painting of former U.S. President Barack Obama. CGTN's Ashta Tal gives us a look into the residency program and a deeper dive into Wiley's vision.
Waves lap onto lava rocks in Yoff, a suburb of Dakar. Overlooking it all is Kehinde Wiley's Black Rock, his home and a newly established artist residency program.
Senegal occupies a really important place in my heart. I've got a lot of Senegalese friends, and I came here years ago. First time I came to Senegal was in 1997. I was on a voyage to find my father.
Wiley worked with a Senegalese architect and interior designers to create this space. Images from African photographers and artists line the walls, alongside works from the diaspora. The piece de résistance is a 20-foot door made of Cameroonian wood. The door plays on the door of no return, a door on Senegal's Gorée Island, which signified a slave's last sight before leaving for the West. At its core, Black Rock is an artist residency program. 3 multidisciplinary artists will stay for 1 to 3 month periods at a time. During their stay, they will not only push themselves, but also challenge their views on Africa's place and potential in the world of art.
Black Rock is political. Black Rock is decidedly political, but in a very unpredictable manner, in the way that art has always been unpredictable. Black Rock is not open only to artists of African descent. Black Rock is open to the world so that the world now sees Africa as a fulcrum point of inspiration.
Art in all of its diverse forms has existed in Senegal for centuries. Pape Cissé has been painting since 1984. He's exhibited across Africa, as well as Europe and America. He remembers fondly the time of Senegal's first president, Léopold Sédar Senghor, when he says art was venerated.
C'est très important pour nous, les artistes africains.
It's really important for us artists to have a site like this. I saw it online and haven't had the chance to visit it. It is a window for African art and that of the diaspora. I am sure things will get better with projects like this.
Ça ira de mieux en mieux avec des projets comme ça.
For centuries, artists have drawn inspiration from West Africa's vibrant art scene. Wiley wants to instead make it a premier arts destination.
When we think about the work of Braque and Picasso, we think about people seeing Africa as this menacing terror that allows them to be frightened and to discover newness within themselves. What happens if we see Africa as a home and a way of seeing not only yourself, but the world? I think that's where revolution comes. It doesn't come in big fist-waving moments. I think it comes in these small moments of revolution. It's like falling in love, and I want the world to fall in love with West Africa.
Wiley will spread the mission of Black Rock to Nigeria, where he will set up another working studio. In the meantime, Black Rock Senegal stands as a studio, an artist residency program, and who knows, maybe a revolutionary love story. Astatal, CGTN, Dakar, Senegal.
And your sports news coming up next. Here's what's ahead. South Africa's Bafana aim to defy the odds at the Africa Cup of Nations.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born. We're there for every goal, for